Sculpture by its nature requires generally a lot of tools and equipment, and you have to know how different materials act. When you're working in any kind of scale, the distance between your thought process and the finished work is quite vast, and kind of hanging on to the original idea and the excitement of that idea is difficult. And I find that making maquettes and also drawing, two of my most favorite activities in the world, allow me to stay as directly connected as possible to my thinking process. A maquette is defined as a model for a larger work. I like the potential for all of these to be large. I like the fact that I can sometimes think of them as being large, even though they're quite small. And I like the way we've set up this room, in that I wanted to create a place in the mind, a study, if you will, where you would have, rather than books on the wall, you would have all these various ways of seeing existence, or things that I'm interested in thinking about. That you could sit here in a comfortable chair, in a chair that you might have in your own home or in an old study that isn't a public chair. It's not a chair that would be in a public space. So you have a sense of being in a private space. And then all of these ideas are kind of laid out for you to investigate. And you can imagine them at any size that you want. Not all of these have been made large. A number of them have, but not all of them are meant to be large. And I like to think of them not so much as maquettes, as models of an idea, or models of a form or a structure. Negative space has always been at least as important as material space. And that goes all the way back to being a sophomore in college and reading about particle physics, and that space and matter are made of the same things. That was so extraordinary to me. That changed my life. And it made it possible for me to think about the physicality of space. That space wasn't the absence of something, it was a different form. I love creating a kind of sinew of line where if you stretched out any one of those lines, it would be this gigantic long journey, but it's all compacted into a certain space. And that became really interesting to me reading about string theory many years later, because that journey of inquiry seemed to me the only way you could pack the amount of information I wanted to pack in there was by having a line just kind of looping around and creating energy. And then the spaces that define what that line are really are carving the material rather than the material carving the space. And I try with the works that I'm making to have a sense of there being a duality where, as I said, these things are parts, but they're also a whole. That this is a structure that you can go inside of, but you can see right through it. I mean, there's a sense of enclosure, but the world around it is included just as much. I would say that the early pieces I was doing, I was working with lodgepole pines and wood from our land. I still have land up in the mountains in Colorado, and I was just taking lodgepole pines, skinning them and using them. I was not interested in them having irregular and organic forms. I liked them because they were absolutely simple, and I could make structures out of them, and they were my particles in 1978. So my work shifted into more flat, dense forms, and I just have a few of those represented, and most of those are in the bronze pieces. And then everything kind of opened up again, and I started building these very bridge-like structures that are made of separate straight lines, and that went on for quite a long time. And now I'm doing these lace-like laser-cut pieces that are so laborious to make because they're all hand-cut with an X-Acto knife for the models that I make. And now that I'm making the colored pieces, I'm doing 2 layers of color. The only way to have a different color on the inside of the work from the color on the outside is for there to be 2 layers of material, because there's no way to paint one side one color and one side the other. So and it's true even with paper, so I'm having to make them twice, which is torture, but it's worth it just to see where it goes. I was enamored for a long, long time with the period of time in the 16th century when science and art and religion and magic were all completely commingled. Artists were inventing instruments, and scientists were people who were also doing astrological charts. And there was this whole sense of wonder, and there were all these different approaches to that wonder. And that I find really, really compelling. I'm still working with exactly the same ideas. I'm just working with different materials, different forms. It's all been very much about form and space and the physicality of matter and the construction of reality and the desire of humans to try and understand what we don't understand, what we can't see, what goes beyond our perceptions. Those things have always been what my work is about.
This video has been made possible by the Wyoming Arts Council and the UW Art Museum Gala Funds.